We begin with a controversial bill that aims to ban transgender students from women's sports teams. Well, it drew crowds to the State House today, rallying for and against the proposal. News 19's Julia Kaufman breaks down the bill and arguments from both sides.
Crowds gathered outside the State House, inside on the second floor, and at a subcommittee meeting, all for the same thing, House Bill 4608, called the Save Women's Sports Act.
Women's sports are not under attack by trans youth in the state of South Carolina, and trans athletes are just as willing and able to participate in their identified gender sports as anybody else.
Emily Mayer protested the bill Thursday. The legislation aims to prohibit students born biologically male from joining girls' sports teams to, quote, maintain fairness for women's athletic opportunities.
You see, much like the bathroom bill in the past, you're trying to create a problem that doesn't exist. In your attempt to fix the problem, you're creating more problems.
Advocate Dylan Gunnels worries the bill could harm trans youth by excluding them from school activities. But college volleyball player Peyton Thompson thinks allowing them to participate could take opportunities away from female athletes.
All coaches have a limited number of scholarship and roster spots. If biological males were allowed to compete for women's teams, they would receive many of these spots and scholarships.
Last year, 2 bills were introduced that also banned transgender students from girls' sports teams, but they didn't make it past committee level. This latest version expands the ban to include collegiate teams.
What we saw was other states that passed it initially without the collegiate. Now they're going back and they're adding the collegiate protection.
Lead sponsor of the bill, Representative Ashley Trantham, says she's confident the bill will get support after stalling last year.
There were several people that did vote against it, and since then, whether it's they just started listening to their constituents or what, they've changed their mind on the votes.
Trantham expects there to be one more meeting to hear from the public before the subcommittee votes on the bill. At the State House, Julia Kaufman, News 19, WLTX.
Well, we also reached out to the State Department of Education for its stance on the bill and are waiting to hear back. Last year, Superintendent Molly Spearman expressed her opposition to the bill, saying she instead supports the current process the State High School League follows for these situations.
Here's a closer look at the State High School League's guidelines for transgender athletes. There are several steps to determine if a transgender student is eligible to participate in a sport. An advisory board will make recommendations to the league on the student's eligibility. The board must consist of a doctor, a mental health professional, and an advocate who are all familiar with the gender identity and expression. This is one of a number of new measures across the country to restrict the rights of transgender youth and their parents. Last month in Texas, Republican Governor Greg Abbott ordered his state to open child abuse investigations into families for seeking gender-affirming medical care. The issue has already come up in court, with the district judge ruling against the governor, preventing child welfare officials from investigating the parents of a transgender teen. And in Florida, lawmakers are set to approve a bill to limit discussions of gender identity and sexual orientation in schools. The proposal, dubbed by opponents as the Don't Say Gay bill, is expected to pass the GOP-controlled legislature this week. Republicans say the bill is meant to prevent districts from integrating lessons on sexual orientation or gender identity into the curriculum. Democrats have said it marginalizes LGBTQ people. A more restrictive bill is being considered in Tennessee.